I also thought about my conversation with Jim. I'd been working late a lot and Carol and I were not together much anymore. Something inside told me that I needed to reconnect with my lovely wife on a physical level. Since she was in such a good mood, I thought tonight was the night to begin to put our relationship back on track. After the great dinner, I helped my wife clean up. She seemed to be in an unusually good mood. We'd been speaking normally for a change. Jenny went to bed and I followed my wife to the bedroom. I began throwing some subtle hints to my wife for sex. I knew she could tell that I was horny, but she didn't respond. She didn't shut me down, but wasn't receptive to any of my hints. When she finished cleaning up in the bathroom, she emerged wearing her long, flannel nightgown, which was a silent message that she wasn't interested in anything physical. Once she was under the covers, I moved closer and snuggled against her flannel-clad body. My hand landed on her stomach and I felt her stiffen. She immediately pushed my hand away and turned over on her side with her back facing me. Normally, I'd just give up, but I was still upset about having Jim over, and it had been quite a while since we had sex. Just the scent of her hair and the warmth of her body had me hard and aching for release. Jenny was asleep, and it wasn't that late, so I decided to ignore her unspoken rejection and went forward, hoping she'd change her mind. I slid over behind her, held her hips, and began to spoon against her body. "Honey, you look so sexy tonight. I really am turned on," I told her softly as I began to push near her body. "Not tonight, Mark." When I didn't stop, she repeated, "I said not tonight. I'm tired. Maybe some other time, okay?" I was stung by her rejection. It had been weeks since I enjoyed her charms, more than a month. I decided that I wasn't taking no for an answer. "Come on, baby. It's been a while. You know how much you turn me on." She pushed my hand off of her and repeated, "Not tonight." I kept trying to hold her until she spun around and told me in a rather harsh tone of voice, "Will you stop?" I said I was tired and I meant it. "What the hell, Carol?" I snapped back. "You've been shutting me out for weeks now. What am I, a muck? I'm just tired. Please, don't make a big deal about this." I sat up and threw the covers back. I gazed down at her angrily. "What the hell's going on, Carol?" I flipped on the light next to our bed and said, "We haven't made love in over a month. You've been distant and mean for weeks. Is there something wrong with you? With me? You may have forgotten, but I'm still your husband and you have to talk to me." I guess my angry tone and harsh expression finally got through. She turned over and gazed up at me, her blue eyes flashing anger. "You a-hole," she snapped. "I told you I'm tired, but you don't seem to care a bit about how I feel, do you? I take care of the kids in the house, and I stay home waiting for you. But you never take me out, you never bring me flowers anymore or even come home on time. Now you want to just screw me, satisfy your filthy pleasure, and go to sleep." "Filthy pleasure? What?" I was caught off guard by her bitterness. I drew back from her angry outburst as she sat up and shook her finger in my face. "You selfish creep. I've given up so much, and—" "All right then, Mark. You want some sex? Is that it? Is that what it'll take for you to leave me alone?" In one quick motion, Carol pulled her nightgown up to her waist, lay back down with her eyes closed, and spread her legs. I gazed at her, wondering who this vindictive witch was lying next to me. "Well," she said, glaring at me, "don't just sit there with a stupid look on your face. Just put it in. Put your little wiener in me and screw me. That's all you wanted, right? A piece of meat. So, get to it and hurry up so I can get some sleep." I was stunned, filled with mixed emotions. She opened her eyes and glared at me like I was some lecherous old man. There was no love at all. I decided to just lay back down and forget it. But Carol didn't seem to want to stop. She was on a roll and wasn't going to let it go. She looked down and saw that my tool had already gone soft. "Come on, Mark." She coaxed with a weird grin. "What's the matter, honey? Lose your cool now that your wife is ready to put out? Are you done?" I bet Jim wouldn't refuse me. He wouldn't lose his hard-on if I gave it up to him. "You're such a loser, damn it. You can't get it up if the woman is not totally compliant." "Well, honey, are you ready?" She smiled wickedly and chuckled. I thought so. She closed her legs and pulled the cover over herself. I heard her whisper loud enough for me to hear, "Loser." Her last remark totally pissed me off. She's been cruel to me before, but never like this. Something inside me broke. "You witch," I cried. "I guess you're just Jim's meat now." I bolted off the bed, headed for the door. Behind me she screamed, "You a-hole. At least he's not a loser like you." I stomped out of the room before I did something rash. I nearly ripped the bedroom door off the hinges when I slammed it. I know the whole house shook and felt bad that Jenny had probably woke up from the yelling. My temper was nearly overwhelming my good sense. I've never been so angry at her before. This was even worse than the night after the charity event. The next morning, I got up still upset. Carol didn't speak about what happened that night, and neither did I. She fixed Jenny's breakfast as I left the house without saying a word. I barely slept and was spitting mad as I left the house. I knew that something was seriously wrong with my marriage. A couple days later, I got home from work and saw Jim's car in the driveway. I was not happy about that. I was home from work on time for a change and hoped Carol and I could speak tonight, have dinner and family night without him around. So I was quite upset to see he was here again. Since the night of our blow-up, we hadn't spoken. I knew she was unhappy about the argument, and so was I. I hoped we'd eventually talk about it and get over it. But we haven't. I thought that maybe tonight was the night. When I saw his car and knew he hadn't called, I was disturbed. I just have to remind him of his promise later. But at the same time, I knew how much Carol liked having him around, and was hoping his presence would somehow thaw out our cool marital relationship. A fun visit over dinner with a friend might help things. Maybe Carol and I could even have sex again if she'd calmed down. I entered the house and was surprised to find them together on the sofa. "Hi, honey," I called out. I looked at him and said abruptly, "Jim?" "Hello, Mark." He replied in a subdued tone. "What's for dinner?" I asked my wife as I hung up my jacket. Carol gazed at me with a blank stare. Looking through me, she replied, "There's roast beef and veggies in the fridge you can heat up in the microwave." She spoke calmly with no emotion as she pointed to the recliner. "But first, can you sit down here, Mark? We need to speak to you." "We?" That was strange. I remained standing, surprised at her strange monotone and the distant look on her face. I began to wonder what she wanted to tell me that was so important. Maybe someone died, she was fired, or maybe she was pregnant. "What's up, honey? Where's Jenny?" "She's having a sleepover at Becky's." "On a school night? You didn't tell me." Ignoring my question, Carol asked, "Would you like a drink, Mark? Maybe a glass of wine or a beer?" "No, I'm fine." Her face showed little emotion. I also noticed how close she and Jim were on the sofa. Usually they'd be at the kitchen table when I got home, so the close seating arrangement was unusual. Carol took a sip of her wine and then turned to me. "There's something we need to discuss, Mark. Why don't you have a seat?" She gestured to the recliner again and glanced over at Jim. He glanced back, giving her a subtle nod. "What's going on here?" I blurted out, feeling quite uncomfortable. "Please sit down," she said more forcefully, pointing to the chair. With serious trepidation, I sat down in the chair across from them. "Mark, there's no easy way to say this." She took a breath, and then the words flowed out. "You know I love you, and Jenny, but things have not been good between us for a while now. I know you are working hard for the family and you are a good father, but there's something wrong with our marriage." "What?" I whispered, my throat constricting. "Our marriage." I glanced at my ex-best friend for clarity and found him staring at the floor. Carol took another sip, glanced back at him, and then continued. "I'm not happy, Mark, and I haven't been for a while." She admitted in a soft, but firm tone. "I know you aren't either. You're aware that we haven't been close for months. Our sex life sucks, and whatever fondness we had between us seems to have gone cold." I was stunned that she would bring up our lack of sex in front of Jim. It was a very private matter, and I wanted to keep it that way. "Gee, Carol," I sputtered. "This isn't the kind of thing to bring up in public, you know. I don't think that Jim wants to hear about that." Carol gazed at me, her eyes narrowing. I could almost see a glimmer of pity as she considered my response. "I'm afraid that it is Mark," she replied with indifference. "You see, Jim knows exactly how I feel. I've been seeing him for the past few months, and we've grown close. We've become closer than I ever expected and closer than you and I have ever been." I felt like the floor just collapsed. I gulped. "What the hell?" I noticed they were holding hands. Jim gave her hand a little squeeze of support as she continued, cutting my heart out. "Yes, Mark, I love you, honey, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I've been unhappy for a while and Jim has tried to help. He's been a great friend to me and he and I are together now. We have fallen in love and—" "What? No. Damn you." I rose to my feet and glared at my former best friend and faithless wife. I was suddenly angry, hurt, amazed, and confused. This was unbelievable. "You must be kidding. This is some sick joke, right? If looks could kill, Jim would have been struck dead." Carol just took another sip of wine, shrugged indifferently, and sighed. Her gaze of pity infuriated me. "It's true, Mark. I'm sorry." "How long, Carol? Please sit back down, Mark. We're all adults here. Let's be civil about this," Carol said with amazing control. Seething with indignation, I said, "How long?" Which? If I expected her to respond angrily to my insult, I was wrong. I guess she had been practicing her speech because she was in complete control. Her beautiful face lacked any emotion. I know this is hard for you, Mark, and I never wanted it to happen. She spoke calmly, adding, but it did. As you and I have grown apart, Jim has been there for me, to help and support me. And to screw you cheating 304. Not taking the bait, Carol said. Yes, well, in any case, Mark, he's been a real friend to console me. I admit that we've been seeing each other. We're not able to hide it any longer. We didn't want you to find out from someone else. So, we had to tell you the truth about us. I lost it. My brain was swirling with emotions. She's cheating on me. My beautiful wife and my a-hole best friend, ex-best friend now are. What? You 304. You cheating, lying 304. I cried in despair. My face grew hot and my expression harsh. In a bitter tone as I asked, tell me, my faithful, lying, cheating wife. Has he screwed you yet? Carol stiffened and looked a little shaky before flashing a cool stare. Yes, Mark. Jim and I are lovers. I glared at Jim and snapped. You backstabbing shit. You took advantage of our marital problems? I thought you were my friend. I trusted you, and you do this? You screw my wife and now are taking her from me, you a-hole. I started to move toward them, and Jim suddenly stood up. His tall, thick frame towered over me. He held out his hands in a defensive gesture. Please, Mark, just settle down. He told me. We didn't plan this, buddy. It just happened. Don't call me buddy, you creep. You're no friend of mine. Come on, Mark. You know I care about you. I feel terrible about this, about how this worked out. But I love Carol. I can't help it. I want her to be happy, and she's certainly not happy the way things are. You're not happy either, if you're honest about it. You don't know shit, you a-hole. I yelled, nearly out of control. Please, Mark, Carol said, rising from her seat. I know this will be hard for you, darling, but we can't stay married. It's really something I have to do. I will make this as easy for you as I can. Jim will support me, and Jenny and... Jenny, my Jenny, I screamed. She could have hit me with a 2x4 and had less effect than the words she just spoke. I'm her mother. Carol pleaded. She needs me, and Jim said. You 304. You cheating 304. You sick witch, you're not taking my daughter, you tramp. Go screw Jim. You both can go to hell, but I'll never give Jenny up. Never. She's your daughter, Carol said, her voice rising for the first time. You don't have to give her up. She's yours and always will be. Please, Mark, Jim said, pleading. Let's be reasonable, okay? What happens between Carol and I won't affect you being her father. It's just that Jenny needs her mother to take care of her. You'll have all the visitation you want. Don't think we'll keep you from her. But I love Carol and she loves me. Jenny will always be your daughter. But when she's with us, she'll be very well taken care of, man. I assure you of that, my friend. Friend, I spat out. Some friend, you are a-hole. Never call me that again, you backstabbing scum sucker. You're a snake in the grass, stealing my wife and now my daughter. Now I see why Carol and I can't get together anymore. You've been undercutting our marriage the whole time, playing like a friend while trying to steal Carol and Jenny from me. You're the sickest a-hole. I must have called him a few more names, but I don't remember. Losing my wife and threatening to take my precious baby suddenly made me insane. I turned my anger toward my former best friend and made my first big mistake. You creep, I'll kill you. I cried, launching myself at the big guy and flinging a fist at his face. Jim's taller than me and a lot heavier. He had always been big and athletic ever since I knew him. He easily deflected my punch and shoved me into an end table and stumbled onto the floor. Embarrassed and in emotional pain, I hit the ground and sprung to my feet. Carol let out a scream. No. Stop it. She cried as I launched another swing at Jim. This time, he caught my fist in midair with as little effort as if he was holding back a little kid. Fighting has never been my strong point, so I guess it was stupid to attack him like this. Damn it, Mark, Jim shouted, shoving me back into a nearby chair. Just listen for a minute and get control of yourself. Carol's was standing next to him, staring down at me with a look of disbelief, pity, and amazement. Jim deflected my attack with so little effort, I felt humiliated. Please, Mark, she pleaded. It doesn't have to be this way. Jim and I are asking nothing from you. He makes enough to support me and Jenny without a problem. Jenny will always be your daughter, and of course, I'll give you generous visitation rights. Never. Come on, Mark, Jim said with pity. You may not think so right now, but we can still be friends. You know I care about you. But I love Carol. I know this will take some time, and I'm going to help as much as I can. He took a breath and said, We can't help that we fell in love, man. Just accept that and everything will be a lot smoother. I know you don't believe me right now, but we both still care about you a lot. I'll help you get over this, and Jenny will always know that you're her father. I'll not get in the way of your relationship with her. That will never change. I was still smarting from my humiliating beatdown. Carol was watching, sobbing a little, but her expression was more pity than sympathy. Big Jim just stood there waiting for my next reaction. I knew he worked out regularly. Of course, he had a lot of time to do that being single and not having to provide for a family. My job and family responsibilities left me with almost no free time. I was out of shape, being too busy working long hours to support my family. I could never take him in a fair fight, but my anger overcame my good sense and I wasn't giving up yet. I acted like I was calming down and stood back up. As I straightened my clothes and took a deep breath, they both were watching me warily. Carol had on high heels, so she was nearly at my height. Jim was much taller and looked down at me as I shot him a look of pure hate. Well, this sure has come as a surprise. The two people I trust more in the whole world have just stabbed me in the back. I'm sorry, Carol whimpered. I just couldn't let you go on thinking we were fine. We couldn't do that to you. Yeah, right? I whispered dejectedly. Well, screw you both. Please, Mark, Jim said. I feel terrible about this, you know, but we respect you too much to just go behind your back. We still care about you a lot. Yeah, I can tell, I said sarcastically. Please understand, Carol said with sad eyes. I didn't mean for it to work out like this. It just happened. I'm so sorry, honey. She went to hug me, but I surprised them both and pushed her back against him hard. She stumbled and fell back against Jim's chest, and he caught her before she fell down. In the split second he caught her, he was vulnerable. I quickly swung my fist as hard as I could, and with all my strength slammed it into Jim's head. At the last second, he saw it coming and his eyes widened. His face grimaced as my knuckles came crashing into his nose. There was a sickening thud of bones snapping and blood splatter onto our carpet. Carol screamed out in a panic. No, as she watched the guy collapse at her feet, blood spurting from his nose like a fountain. He was woozy but still coherent. I was on him in a second, swinging my fist into his bleeding face, but he recovered quickly. He took a few blows to the head and then pushed me away. You idiot, he shouted in a weird nasal tone. He started to come at me, but Carol pulled his arm. No, Jim, don't, she cried, holding him back. I wanted him to come at me, but he just stood there wincing with his nose dripping with blood. Come on, wife stealer. I go to trying to get him to fight. You can steal her behind my back, but you're just a gutless creep in a fair fight. Need a woman to protect you. Can't fight your own battles? Hiding behind a woman's skirt? What's wrong with you, you loser? His eyes were raging, but Carol clung to his arm. I guess he knew he was the eventual winner anyway, getting my wife in the end. Screw you, Mark, he finally said. You're lucky she's here to protect you. Don't pull this shit again, or I'm gonna kick your bum. Big talk, I growled, with my hands in a fighting stance. Jim relaxed and let Carol pull him away. He took out a handkerchief and mopped up the blood flowing from his nose. The two of them proceeded to the front door in silence before Carol turned back to me angrily. It didn't have to be this way, Carol snapped. We tried to let you down easily, Mark, but you had to get physical. Screw you, and screw him too, I told her bitterly. Oh, I guess you've already done that, witch. Carol's face twisted in anger, but she didn't speak. I then noticed the two suitcases sitting by the closet. Jim picked one up and headed for the front door, casting me angry glances as he left. Carol picked up the smaller one and followed him out the door. She stopped once, looking back at me like she wanted to say something, but instead just turned and left. As they drove off, I bolted to my car and drove like a maniac to Becky's house. I parked and ran to the front door, knocking on it in a panic. Becky's mother answered with a sad look on her face. Hello, Mark, she said in a sad voice. I know why you're here. Carol called a few minutes earlier and spoke to Jenny. Jenny said her mom told her to leave the house and go somewhere. I don't know what she told her. I think they're picking her up somewhere, but they didn't tell me where. You knew about this? I asked in disbelief. Well, not everything. Carol asked me to keep it quiet, so I did. She then looked at me with the same pity my wife did. I'm so sorry about all this. I always thought you two had a great marriage. I didn't know about all your problems. Yeah, I didn't either. I told her angrily. Do you know where Jenny went? Any friends she has around her? I really need to get to her. I don't, Mark. I'm sorry. I would tell you if I did. You know that. Bullshit, I growled. She's a cheating 304 and you're covering for her. I know that now. I wonder if your husband knows you're covering for a woman that's cheating on her husband. Maybe you are too, and you two cover for each other. I don't have time for cheating 304s anymore, so don't ever speak to me again. She was angry and glared at me before slamming the door in my face. I left her house in a blaze of despair. Once again, my scheming wife and ex-friend had outsmarted me. They had everything covered. It was all planned out. Carol had betrayed me, and now Jenny was gone too. I couldn't think straight anymore. My mind was swirling with all the issues suddenly thrust onto me. I went home to an empty house, feeling like I was dead. I managed to get to work the next day somehow. After a few hours, I began to feel a little bit normal again. The intense accounting workload was no longer a dreary job. It was a blessing, something to keep my mind off my problems. After work, I went home and tried to think straight. The first thing I did was call Jenny. "Hello, Dad?" She answered right away. "Jenny, my God, I miss you so much, sweetie. I want to come get you and bring you home with me, honey." There was a pause that grew awkward. "Where are you?" "I am with Mom," she answered in a tense tone. "Mom said I should tell you that I'm fine and..." "Where are you?" "I want to come get you." "I can't, Dad. Mom and Uncle Jim told me." "Stop. He's not your uncle. Never mention that backstabber again, Jenny." I spoke out of anger without thinking how it would sound to Jenny. "Why? I'm sorry, Jenny. I'm just so upset, honey." I apologized as Jenny started to cry. "Please, honey, just tell me where you are. I'll get you." "I can't, Dad," she sobbed. "Mom said I have to wait a bit before I can see you again. She said you're pretty upset right now and..." "I'm upset with her, not you, baby," I interrupted. "They stabbed me in the back, but you did nothing wrong. Nothing. I just need to see you, and we need to be together. Please." Suddenly, the line was cut off. I called her back, but the call just went to voicemail. I pounded the table in frustration. No doubt Carol was filling her head with all sorts of lies. I bolted back to the car and zoomed over to Jim's house. I ran up to the door and pounded on it, but there was no answer. I checked the garage and found his SUV wasn't there. Neither was his BMW. I walked around the house looking in windows but didn't see anyone. Suddenly, a police car drove up. The officer got out glaring at me and called me over. "I'm looking for my daughter." I told him before he could ask. "Yeah," he said, looking at me with little sympathy. "I know. The neighbors called the station and said someone was poking around the house. I also heard about your separation and the problem with your wife." "Who told you that?" I said warily. "Does it matter?" He said, "You have to go. Now. You're not wanted around this house. If you return, you're trespassing. I'll have to cuff you and take you down to the station for questioning." I was nearly out of control. I took a deep breath and got in my car. Jim must have taken them off somewhere out of my reach. They outsmarted me again. Of course, I got a lawyer, and he gave me all the bad news. I'd have to split all our assets, including the house. Carol would no doubt get custody of Jenny, despite her running around on me. I might have a chance for custody if the judge found that I was a good parent and that Jenny would agree to live with me now. That was my saving grace. Despite the brief phone call with her, I knew she loved me. I'd been there when she was sick. I took her to her after-school events. I went to her school to see her teacher on Parents' Night. I had been there for every major event in her life. But now I was alone. Carol had Jim to keep her company. I needed someone to help me get over this terrible situation. I needed Jenny in my life and knew that she'd be with me so we could be some sort of family again. I was served with the divorce papers at home. Carol knew my work schedule and must have informed her lawyer. She attached a note to the decree that said she didn't want to embarrass me by serving me at work. Tough shit. I could have cared less about that. It said our finances would be split 50-50ths. We could sell the house and split the proceeds, or she could buy me out and live at home with Jenny. According to her lawyer, that was her preference, to live in our house so Jenny could continue her education in the same school district. We'd each keep our cars. There was no alimony, but I'd have to pay for custody for Jenny. My lawyer said it was an equitable split. I didn't agree. After all, she ran out on me and was fooling around on me for months. Jenny was my daughter, and I wanted full custody. He said I was foolish, but he'd submit a counter offer from what I told him. In the meantime, that a-hole Jim took my family away on a vacation in Florida. I never found out exactly where. Jenny did call me. Our conversations were strained, and she acted very nervous. I tried to tell her I loved her and that I needed her, but I came off sounding desperate. No shit. I was desperate to get back some shred of self-respect. With my family gone, I threw myself into my work. There was always something to do for a licensed accountant, and I was working overtime as much as I could. I never heard when Carol and Ginny returned from Florida. I guess they didn't want me to know. The day of our court date, I arrived with my lawyer and Carol and Jim arrived with theirs. I cast him a glaring, hateful look, trying to kill him with my eyes. He just looked away and didn't return my gaze. Carol just looked indifferent, as if the breakup of our family and her failed marriage was already in the past. When it came time for the final disposition, the judge took Ginny into his private chambers and spoke to her for nearly an hour. I kept asking my lawyer why it was taking so long. I knew she must miss me by now. I haven't seen her in weeks. She just had to tell the judge that she wanted to stay with me in our home, and I could finally get on with my life. The judge finally came out and issued his final ruling. He said it was a difficult decision and that neither Carol or I should dismiss how hard it was for a 14-year-old to make such a choice. It ended up that Ginny was going to live with Carol in the a-hole. I nearly fell over in a coma and barely heard a word after that. I walked out of the courtroom before he finished, with the judge yelling at me to sit back down. I ignored that a-hole and just staggered to the hallway. When I finally got my brain back, my lawyer came out and told me the rest of the judge's decision. I would have to pay for custody and would have to either buy out Carol's half of the house or sell it and split the equity. He seemed pleased with the decision and actually looked proud that I wouldn't have to pay alimony and that Carol had to give me generous visitation rights. "You came out okay, Mark," he said, slapping me on the back. "It could have been a lot worse." I was speechless. Carol emerged from the courtroom, glanced over at me with a pitying look. Jim just left without saying anything. He took her by the arm and led my cheating 304 wife out of the courthouse. I never saw Ginny. I was in a daze as I walked out. In the parking lot, Carol came over to me. Jim was a few yards away looking guilty. I noticed he still had a bandage on his nose. "This can work out, Mark," Carol said pleasantly. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but Ginny loves you and wants to be with you. She'll live with us, of course, but you can see her anytime you want. Both Jim and I want you to be in Ginny's life, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate and make this transition as smooth as possible for you." I just stared at her in disbelief. Was she insane? When I didn't answer, Carol said in a soothing tone, "Please, Mark, I know this is difficult. We want you to accept this judgment. Let's work to make Ginny's life as smooth as we can. It's for her benefit, you know." Finally, my mind returned. I looked over at Jim, who was gazing blankly at me. Then I looked straight in Carol's eyes and sneered with as much venom as possible. "Screw you, witch." I glared at Jim and said, "Go to hell and take him with you." Carol's wistful expression disappeared. Jim heard me and looked over with a glare. My lawyer tugged at my arm and tried to pull me away. "Come on, Mark. This won't help. Let's go," Carol said with irritation. "Damn it, Mark. Stop being childish. You have to help Ginny for her sake. This isn't easy for her either. She's your daughter, and she needs you now, more than ever." "No, witch. She's your daughter now, not mine," I informed bitterly. "Don't ever contact me again, you 304, you or Ginny. And keep your shithead stud away from me, too. If you ever come near me again, I'll—" "Stop," my lawyer shouted before I said any more. He pulled me away in a firm grasp and told me, "Just stop talking, Mark. It won't help. Wait until you calm down, damn it." Carol had tears in her eyes as she pleaded, "She's your daughter, Mark. She needs you right now." "Screw you, 304, I told her. I looked at Jim, who was staring back at me with obvious anger. "Screw you too, shithead, my former good friend." What a laugh. My lawyer dragged me away as I kept yelling, "Just go and screw my scum-sucking wife, you a-hole. Screw the 304 all you want, you backstabbing creep." Everyone around us was watching and listening. An officer came out to see what was going on, and I finally stopped yelling. They pulled me around to my car as my lawyer tried to explain the details of the judgment. I heard I had to pay her some amount each month for Ginny, and that I needed to come up with money for the house and a few other things. At some point, I just yanked my arm away and ran to my car sobbing. The next day, the lock on our finances was released. Carol had taken half of our savings and investments, all the money I was saving for our family. There was some left for me, but not enough to do much more than survive. I received an official letter asking me to either move or provide her part of the equity of our house if I planned to sell it. I hastily sent back that I would sell it. With a policeman in tow, Carol returned the day after and retrieved her car and all of her personal items. She also claimed most of the furniture, which I paid for. When she finished picking out her things, she tried to speak to me. I told her, "Screw you, 304, and walked away. The cop warned me to be civil, but I didn't care about him. When they walked out of the house, Carol had tears in her eyes. She got to the front yard and asked the cop to wait. She turned to me and said she wanted to talk. I went out onto the front yard and the cop stayed nearby. We just stood there for a moment in silence. I just waited with an indifferent look as my wife tried to gather her thoughts. "Please don't hate me, Mark," she said, wiping her tears. "I know you're not happy right now. It's not easy, but it will all work out in the end." I wanted to curse her out and say never. Instead, I kept quiet and let her say her piece. "We weren't happy together, and you know it," she continued. "Things were getting worse between us, and I just couldn't go on." She stopped sniffling and wiped her eyes. She took a breath and her expression grew more determined. "But Mark, what I really need to talk to you about is that I need your help with Jenny. She's not happy right now. Our divorce was hard on her." I snorted as if it wasn't my fault. Carol picked up on that but ignored my insinuation. "Please just listen," she pleaded. "I spoke to her teacher and her schoolwork is suffering. Mark, she barely speaks to me now and doesn't see her friends anymore. She stays in her room nearly all the time. I'm worried, Jim, and I know she needs you. And I need your help with her so she can live a good life, a life with both parents." Jim said he won't. "Don't mention him to me ever again." I instantly snapped. "Just go screw your wife, stealing shithead Carol. But never say his name to me. I never want to see or hear about him. Ever. He's a backstabbing liar, and you know it. He knew we were married, and he pursued you. He came across all friendly and nice. Then he seduced you with his money and screwed you behind my back. That's not the way it was, Mark. Not at all. That's exactly what happened." I countered angrily. "I thought he was my friend. A friend wouldn't do that. He's a cheater and liar, and so are you." I said that a little too loud, and the cop moved closer, silently warning me to keep it civil. I noticed one of our neighbors had come out to look. Carol flinched at my remarks, but gave the cop a gesture that it was okay. "Please, Mark," Carol said, holding it together. "I really need your help with Jenny. She's upset. I've never seen her so hurt. Ask the a-hole to help. He's screwing you now. You're his problem. He's not her father. You are. She needs you more than ever. You must think I'm stupid, but I guess I am pretty stupid. At least I was. I've been the stupid, clueless husband that you found it so easy to cheat around on. The idiot that thought my friend actually respected me and my marriage was forever. I was an ignorant fool, Carol. So, I see where you're coming from. If I was so stupid while we were married, why not now?" I laughed, then my expression hardened. "But now that I found out about you, I'm not so stupid and clueless. I now know how sneaky and underhanded you and the a-hole really are. How easily you lie. You guys must have had a great laugh about me, didn't you? You guys were screwing and I was such a trusting fool. That's in the past, you witch. Now I hate you and wish you'd just disappear. First you cheat with a friend, then you break up our family, and now you need my help? What a laugh. Never again, witch." Carol stiffened, staggered by my accusations. "Please, Mark. We never thought that about you. I never wanted to hurt you, and neither did he? But that's all in the past. We're split up now. But we still have a daughter, and we have to get along for her sake. Think of Jenny." I looked at her like she was a piece of shit. "Yeah, right." I snickered. "Damn. You really are a piece of work, you cheating 304. You screw around on me, and now you see the consequences. Not as much fun as you expected, is it, witch?" Carol flinched and let out a little sob. The cop glared at me. "Let me ask you a question, my faithless wife," I said in a reasonable tone. "I just want to know how you can have a relationship with a man with no morals?" That caught her off guard and she stopped sniffling. "What? Jim has morals? A guy that screws his best friend's wife?" I chuckled. "First he seduces her, then carries on a sleazy affair behind his friend's back. Finally, he steals her away with his money, takes his daughter, and ruins his marriage. You call a guy like that moral? He's exactly the opposite. It was never." I interrupted. "How can you ever trust a guy like that, Carol?" "I do trust him," she stammered, off balance. "Really?" I asked sarcastically. "A guy that steals his best friend's wife and daughter? A guy that uses his money to buy her love?" Carol glanced at the cop and said tentatively, "He's not like that, Mark, and you know it." And yes, I do trust him. But her eyes were darting around, and I could see I struck a nerve. "I don't see how," I went on confidently. "You know the kind of guy he is. A playboy. He has money and screws lots of women. You're just another notch in a long line of easy holes. I can't tell you how many times he's bragged to his friends at the bar about his latest conquest. You're just the latest booty call for him. By the way, dear, have you been tested yet?" "Tested?" She looked confused. For STDs and AIDS. He gets around and he might have caught something nasty and passed it on to you. For my protection, I had to get tested right after you left me for him. You know he's quite a player and gets lots of strange holes. He's not like that anymore, Mark. She shot back. Sure, he is. You saw him in action. Girls flock to that a-hole. He has lots of girlfriends. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting a little on the side. Do you know where he is right now? He's at work. Sure, he is. Is that what he told you? Yes. He's at work and maybe he took the afternoon off for some strange. He works with a lot of hot girls you know, like that one at his party. Maybe he's screwing her after work. Then he comes home and whispers sweet nothings in your ear. You're a little too trusting, Carol. I know he still goes out alone and probably meets plenty of sexy girls. Some younger and prettier than you. You're not getting any younger, you know. He may be getting tired of you already. He likes variety. It takes lots of hot women to keep him contented. Carol's eyes narrowed as I said with a laugh, shit. Maybe he's getting a nooner right now. I wouldn't be surprised. You know he's done it before, don't ya? You did get tested, right? Carol was getting frustrated by my insinuation. I guess she never thought about Jim's other women before now. No, I didn't. But he told me we're exclusive. He loves me, you know. Oh, right. I laughed at how naive she appeared. He tells that to a lot of women. Jim's a player, honey. You know his past. I guess he wouldn't tell you that he was screwing other women. Not yet anyway. Her eyes suddenly had a bit of insecurity. My accusations were hitting home. Poor Carol wasn't confident about her relationship as she was a few moments before. You say Jenny is having trouble dealing with our divorce? How will she feel when she finds out you ruined her family for a guy that's cheating on you? That you abandoned our marriage, broke her father's heart, and messed up her life for a sleazy, lying homewrecker? That'll really help her handle her issues. Get real, you fool. That a-hole isn't the ethical choir boy you think he is, unless you think it's ethical for a guy to screw and steal his best friend's wife. Remember that the next time he goes off for a so-called business trip, he doesn't mind screwing married women, or any woman for that matter. If he's got a stupid bimbo at home waiting for him, so much the better. Carol blinked and suddenly looked pale. Her eyes were nervous and darting around like she wasn't sure what to say. I kept on. I've known him for quite a while now. I said, smiling wickedly. You think he's a great guy, right? I know for a fact he cheated on his first wife. Cheated on her multiple times. Why wouldn't he do that again? After all, he's not even married to you. You're just a sex buddy. An easy piece of meat. I bet he'll hold off cheating for a while, long enough to get his new, clueless, gullible screw bunny forget his wandering ways. Then it's back to normal. Her eyes were flashing angrily now. She knew what I was doing, and she didn't like it. He's not like that anymore. She stated through tight lips. Sure, he dated a lot before we're together. He told me. He told you exactly what you want to hear, right? I laughed. Give the little woman a few lies to satisfy her, then go out and do what he wants. Boy, are you stupid. How will Jenny ever respect you after she finds out? I let that harpoon sink in, then snickered. We used to laugh about it. We'd go out drinking, and when he got a little high, he'd laugh and tell me what a stupid witch Martha was. His ex-wife, remember her, Carol? The woman he married? He didn't respect her one bit. He screwed around on her right from the beginning of their marriage. He used to laugh at how easy it was to cheat. It was a joke, and he played around on her for years. Now he's got you, another easy bimbo to screw around on. The pattern continues. That's a lie. She spat. Jim's not like that. He loves me, just like he loved Martha. Face it, Carol, you got yourself a real winner. A cheating, lying boyfriend that already has screwed up a marriage. If he marries you, why not again? Carol's fists were balled up. Her eyes were flashing daggers. That's a lie, Mark. Jim's a decent guy. I know it. Is that right? What do you think the next time he comes home late? Or you find lipstick on his collar? How about a number on a piece of paper in his pocket? Or when another woman calls him? Or when he dances with some hot-looking chick at a club? Can you still trust him to be exclusive, my lovely ex-wife? He has a track record, and it isn't good. He's a known cheater. A proven cheater. I doubt he'll be faithful to you. After all, you're just a dumb floozy for him. If he couldn't be faithful to his wife, why should he go to the trouble to be faithful to you? I saw the cop out of the corner of my eye openly smirking as he heard me. He knew exactly what I was doing, undercutting Carol's faith in him. She was caught between anger and confusion. She didn't believe I was right about Jim, but she couldn't just dismiss my arguments either. Just give Jenny a call, will you? She finally spat out. She needs you now, Mark. You've got visitation this weekend. You can pick up Jenny from school Friday afternoon. Forget it. What? I said forget it. Jenny's your problem now. I'm not going to let you and that a-hole jerk me around with visitation. Canceling at the last minute, asking to move our dates around for your convenience. Just forget it. I don't trust you. And by the way, I said as I pulled a check from my pocket. It was made out to Carol, with a notation in the description line. What's this? You have to pick her up, Mark. She wants to see you. Forget the visitation. I told her cold as ice. Here's a check for the full amount of my custodial responsibilities, forever. It also covers partial payment to her college fund. Now that you and shithead are her parents, you deal with the consequences. I want no further contact with any of you. Carol took that check and gazed at it like it was poison. You don't mean that. I do. But Mark, listen. Goodbye, Carol. You and your cheater deserve each other. Go to hell. You and shithead have a shitty life. Don't contact me again. Tell Jenny I'm sorry she left me too. I really thought she loved me enough. I loved her more than anything, but seeing her often would just break my heart all over again. I'm moving on from both of you traitors, and if I ever see your a-hole boyfriend again. I noticed the cop listening, so I didn't finish my threat. I didn't want any law enforcement officer hearing a threat made against them. Carol knew how I felt. I walked in the house and slammed the door and could hear my ex-wife sputtering in frustration. Nothing about our talk had gone as she expected. My cell phone had a dozen messages on it by the end of the day. I just deleted them and didn't bother listening. I went to my provider and got a new one. I guess it was Jenny or Carol that called, but I was in too much pain to listen to anything they had to say. The next couple days I finished my preparations for my new lifestyle. I went to the bank and pulled my money out of my accounts and opened up a new one. There wasn't much money after the check I wrote to Carol. I then went to a real estate agent and put my home on the market. When he got the sign placed and left, I got out my spreader and spread Roundup over my entire yard. It would soon kill all the grass and shrubs, leaving the yard bare as a desert. I bought fish from the market and dropped them down in the heating vents and turned on the heat to let the smell of rotting fish permeate the house. I was purposely ruining the house so it would sell cheap, and she couldn't get a dime from it. Of course, neither would I, but I didn't care about that. I only wanted to screw my ex-wife from getting anything. The next day, I moved out what little furniture I had left and rented a tiny, cheap studio apartment. It was located close to where Jim's car dealership and not too far from my office. I sold my car for cash and pawned everything that even remotely reminded me of my ruined marriage. Then I threw myself into my work, making as much money as I could with overtime. My boss was happy, and I guess I was too. Working hard helped me forget about the traitors. The real estate agent called me and said my house wouldn't sell. It has a terrible smell and the yard is a mess. Just lower the price as much as needed. Are you sure? That's not really necessary, Mr. Covington. I mean, if we just put in some grass and get rid of the awful smell, I'm sure we can get full price. He obviously wanted a full price to enhance his commission. Nah, just dump the thing. Quicker the better. But we might have to cut the price by as much as 30%, or even more if we can't get rid of the smell. No problem. Just get it sold. Cut the price in half if you have to. Gosh. All right. If you're sure. I'm sure. The house eventually sold, but the price was so low we barely got anything out of it. I sent Carol the sales documents and a check for $500. I know she was shocked and expected far more. I didn't hear from her because she didn't have my new number. I told her to contact me through my lawyer. He did call me and said Carol was upset with the price. I just laughed. He also said Jenny was calling him almost every week. Don't you want to let her know how you are? He asked me. I know you're upset with your wife, but your daughter was nearly crying when I told her I couldn't release your number. They made their choice. Now they have to live with it. It was a few days since the house sold. So far, all my plans were working. I wasn't sure how much of my marital problems Carol's family knew, or Jim's either. So I composed an email explaining in explicit terms how my former best friend had seduced my cheating wife behind my back, how he stole her from me and broke up my family and stole my daughter. Of course, I embellished the tale quite a bit. None of the facts were wrong, and I made sure that everything was the truth. But the way I phrased the story made him sound like the biggest jerk in the world. It also made my ex-wife Carol appear to be the biggest 304 on the planet. I didn't use those words, but the message was clear. He was a good-for-nothing creep, and she was a lying, cheating 304 that no one could ever trust. I gathered the email addresses of everyone we knew, all of Carol's family, her friends, Jim's family and friends, everyone from our church and the club that Jim goes to on occasion. I also acquired the names of all the employees and staff at Jim's dealership and Carol's workplace too. I even found some of his customers and included them. I pasted some unflattering remarks to Jim's Facebook page, his company's website, and any other person or entity I could think of that had any contact with them. I put the document I composed in an email to everyone, hit the send button, and let the shit fly. The next day, my lawyer called me, upset about the emails, and asked me to stop sending them. He said I could be sued for damages. I told him that I could never be sued for telling the truth and sent him a copy of the email for him to check. He said it was truthful, but a judge may not feel the same way. I did try to shelter Jenny and didn't send anything to her school, her friends, or her friends' parents. But I know they heard about it, and Jenny was probably embarrassed at school when she was confronted by them. I went to a printer and had a bunch of leaflets made up about how I was screwed by Jim and my ex-wife. I didn't use my name, but they'd know who wrote it if anyone confronted him. Again, I embellished the tale and made them the most deplorable a-holes ever. I went to Jim's dealership in the middle of the night and hung them on every tree, telephone pole, and light fixture I could find. I also went to every restaurant and put them up in the bathrooms. I knew some of their favorite places to hang out and made sure the bathrooms there had one too. I even paid some chicks to put them up in the ladies' rooms. In days, nearly the entire town knew the details of their sordid affair. I made sure everyone knew Jim was a salesman at his dealership, and to avoid such a sleazy creep. By this time, my lawyer was fielding calls from all over. He was upset with me, so I just dropped him as my lawyer. He was pleased I did. I noticed later that some of the signs had been taken down. I didn't care. I had some left and pasted them about town, even put them around Jim's house, which I know pissed him off. After the divorce, I was nearly broke. But now that I was working overtime, I was making some serious money. My cheap apartment cost very little, and I had so few financial obligations that my net worth began to increase rapidly. My paychecks were quite fat now. In a few months, I'd saved quite a bit of money and more was coming in every week. It's amazing how much money an accountant can make working 14-hour days, with nothing to spend it on. I hired a private investigator. I didn't need the expensive surveillance plan he offered. Instead, I just had him check up on Jim and my wife's schedule, so I'd know where they were at any particular time of day. When I had a grip on their routines, I had enough to start on the next part of my plan. Jim Simpson was well off, but he wasn't filthy rich. With my campaign against them, the rumors about the cheaters' despicable acts were now common knowledge. It must have cut into Jim's income, because he sold cars and anyone that knew was leery about buying a car from him. Car salesmen already had a bad image, and his was worse than most. As his income was squeezed, his ability to maintain an expensive lifestyle was also diminishing. Carol's work at the art gallery was also having trouble. It seems that many of the folks that used to frequent her place didn't want to deal with a lying cheating wife. I'm sure the wives of the men that frequented their store didn't want their husbands interacting with a sexy divorcee with a known track record of screwing other men. Carol also used to belong to a gym, which was how she managed to keep up her sumptuous figure. But as her and Jim's income shrunk, the gym membership had to go. Jim got rid of the BMW, but kept the fancy SUV. At some point, I wondered how he would manage the mortgage on his big house. I hoped that soon that would be hit as well. I did go out on occasion and meet women. It was more to just get my mind off of work than any hope of romance. Carol seemed to have killed that. I never had luck dating any of them and really didn't care. I'd get some of the women drunk and pay them to call Jim's house when I knew he wasn't home. I made it sound like a teenage prank, and it wasn't hard to get these women to go along. I even listened when she'd call and ask to speak to Jim. Carol would answer and tell her he wasn't home. The girl would say something like, "Just tell him Kathy said hi," or "Let him know I had a great time last week." Or if I was really evil, "Let him know that Mary will be ready tomorrow," a suspicious but vague insinuation. Carol would simply slam down the phone. But it was putting doubt in her mind about Jim's faithfulness. After all, neither of them were faithful and she knew it. I also had some guys call Jim's dealership and complain about him. Some of the stories mentioned the big guy's history of cheating, how underhanded he seemed, anything that put doubt in his boss's mind. I even had a couple guys complain that Jim was hitting on their wives. Of course, it was all fantasy, but it must have done the trick because I heard that Jim was changing jobs. I also used the same game against Carol. I know they probably figured it was me behind all this, but I know that with their histories, the seeds of doubt were planted. I spent most of my time working, and since I wasn't dating, I had free time when I wasn't in the office. I spent time online and began to learn about short-term trading in stocks and options. Most people would never be interested in trading online, but I began to realize how much I could make with a little bit of knowledge. It was simple to set up an online account with a brokerage firm. They had a training page on their website that I began to study. The philosophy of short-term trading was a simple concept, but it did involve risk. The online training sessions taught me how to limit the risk and maximize the rewards. I was amazed how much money could be made with so little cash to start with. Learning to use the trading techniques took a little time at first, and I did lose money on some trades. But as time went on, I learned more and began to make some serious money, more than I was making on my job as an accountant. In 2 months, I had quite a bit of money to play with. So I took the plunge and got into options trading, which meant that I could use a small amount of cash to leverage into a large amount of profit. During my off hours, I spent a lot of time online, setting up trades that would bear fruit in less than 1 day. A couple months later, my account value was deep into 6 figures. It was after work, rather late in the evening when I was drinking in a bar. I had only stopped in for a moment, so I was surprised when Jim and Carol burst into the place together and confronted me. I guess they found out where I was living and had me followed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jim yelled angrily. Everybody in the place turned to see what the commotion was about. When a big, 6'2" guy's yelling, it's hard not to notice. "You a-hole," he shouted, pointing his finger at me. "I know it was you that's screwing me over." Carol was next to him, nodding her head, glaring at me like she wanted to beat me up. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said innocently. Jim's face went beet red. "You a-hole, I should kick your bum. You jerk," Carol added angrily. "It's you, isn't it? You're messing with Jim's business and my job." "Damn it, Mark, you're a real a-hole, you know." I just sat there smirking at them and laughed. "You two are delusional. You're screwing up my work, you dumb shit." Jim shouted. "You're screwing my wife." I told him, smiling. "I'm not your wife, you a-hole," Carol screamed. "I left your sorry bum for Jim, and he's a better man than you'll ever be." Jim jumped in, yelling, "You'd better cut out this shit right now, or I'm gonna sue your sorry bum." I acted cool as a cucumber, while they were nearly out of control. They must have had someone following me to know I was here. I didn't plan this, but it was working out in my favor. I began to see how this situation could help me. "Sue me for what?" I asked Jim calmly. "I did nothing." "You're crazy," Carol screeched. "Sue you for all those leaflets and those nasty emails. I know your ego was crushed when I left you, but you know you're a loser anyway." "Leaflets? What leaflets?" "You know, the ones insulting Jim and I." "Oh, those leaflets." I laughed. "Can't take the truth?" "I guess the truth hurts when you're nothing but a lying, cheating 304, and he's an a-hole." I said the truth in the emails, but the leaflets weren't my idea. "You're a liar," Carol cried. "No, you're the lying, cheating 304, I said with a smirk. "And he's just a backstabbing loser that can't get his own woman. He has to steal someone else, like his friend's wife." "Why you?" "Oh," Jim started to say before Carol grabbed his arm and forcefully pulled him back. The big guy was pissed, more than I've ever seen him before. I'm sure he would have hit me if she wasn't here. "You a-hole," Carol told me. "You know I lost my job? They fired me, damn it. And Jim's having trouble too. He had to change jobs, and that's not going well either. You have to cut this shit off, Mark." I laughed. "I guess people don't want to be around a lying skank, huh?" Jim's face was twisted with rage. He was on the verge of losing control. "You cut this shit off or I'll..." He started to say again. "You'll what?" I goaded him. "You'll steal my wife and my family?" "Oh, right. You already did that, you screwed up. Just shut your mouth, loser." Everyone around us was watching in silence. No one expected a smaller guy like me to confront such a big guy. There were smirks all around, and the manager was making his way toward us. I had to move quickly. "I mean it, Mark," Carol warned angrily. "Stop this shit or else." I looked her in the eye and asked, "Has he started cheating on you yet, Carol?" "He has a history of it, you know. Just ask Martha how." And that was the last word I got to say before the big guy hit me with a pile driver fist to my jaw. The heavy punch drove me back to the bar, and it nearly knocked me out. Before me or anyone could react, Jim jumped over and was punching me, flailing away with both hands. "I'll kill you," he cried as I tried to deflect his punches. He got in 2 or 3 good ones, 2 to my face and another to my ribs. I heard something snap before the guys around us could react. By the time they pulled him off me, I was in serious pain. My nose was bloody, my ribs were hurting bad, but I smiled because it couldn't have worked out better. It took 3 guys to hold him down, and Carol was screaming and crying at the same time. Someone called the police because they were there in minutes. I just lay there bleeding and looking like I was in pain. But I was laughing inside at how this would play out. Of course, Jim was arrested for assault. They took him away in handcuffs with Carol sobbing as she followed him out the door. The ambulance was called for me. I knew I would be okay, but I let the medical folks take me out on a stretcher to make it look as bad as possible. I even had them taking pictures of me as they attended to me. It would be fuel for my lawsuit. As you guessed, I hired the most ruthless lawyer I could find and pressed charges against the a-hole. Carol left me dozens of crying, sobbing messages filled with cursing. I couldn't have been happier. It took a day before Jim got out on bail, but his employment was in serious jeopardy. He was still new on his job and probably on probation. Having a big, barroom brawler on the payroll and a cheater to boot wasn't an asset to his company. After all the bad press, he was finally let go and had to find another job. He never did find work. A month or so later, Jim was tried and convicted of assault and even attempted murder. I made sure to include that charge. He served 3 months in jail, only on weekends so he could still work. But he had to pay a big fine and was on probation for years. Carol was crushed. Her new boyfriend now had a record and finding a job would be even more difficult than before. My injuries healed pretty quick. Jim had to pay for my medical bills. I also took out a restraining order against him, another blow in my favor. I heard later that he was selling his house. Guess it was hard to keep up the payments without a full-time job. Jim found odd jobs for cash while he was searching for work. Carol got another job, but it didn't pay much. The three of them moved into a cheap, 2-bedroom apartment to save money. He also got rid of his SUV. He purchased a couple shitty cars to get around. Life is tough. I let things simmer for a while. I kept having women call the house when Jim was at work and Carol was home. Occasionally some guy would call, asking for her when Jim was home. I tried to have them call when Jenny was in school or was out, so she wasn't involved. I don't know if it was having any effect on the cheaters, but I was hoping it would. My PI kept tabs on the couple's work issues for me. When Jim tried to apply for another job, I made sure his prospective employers knew exactly the kind of guy they were considering. It took him months to finally get a mechanic job at some low-class car repair shop. They hired other ex-cons, so I guess Jim's record didn't bother them. Carol was working as a waitress at a Denny's, but I'm sure wasn't making much. By this time, I had saved up a shitload of cash. I also had quite a nice income with all the overtime I worked. I was banking at least 10 grand a month, meaning it was time to get on with the next part of my plan. When I heard that Jim had to sell his house, I went to his old neighborhood and drove by his old home, the huge one he had before all the trouble. I was happy to see a for sale sign on it. Through my lawyer, I put in a low bid for the house and was stunned when they accepted my offer. Apparently, the housing market wasn't doing all that well and they needed to dump the property. In a couple weeks, we had a quick closing and I moved in. The house was beautiful. For bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms, a formal dining room, and a landscaped yard. I moved into the master bedroom, fully appreciating the fact that this was where my ex-friend had seduced and fornicated with my cheating wife. It gave me a perverse sense of pleasure to know that he'd never enjoy this bedroom or the rest of this huge, lovely house again. I cashed in some stocks and began to decorate the house. To make sure the result was perfect, I hired a professional interior decorator. She and I had a meeting where I expressed what I wanted. She asked about the budget, and I told her that I would be very generous, but not wasteful. I wanted the place to reflect a home, not a showpiece for a magazine. I also had her use some of the photos of my old house as a template for the decor. At over a 200 grand worth of furniture and decor, the woman did a great job. I also hired a landscaper and he fixed up the yard. It had been a real showpiece. But with all the problems, it was a little overgrown in the weeks since the cheaters moved out. He also put in a hot tub on the deck and fixed up the patio with a brick barbecue. It looked great. After all the updating, I believe I nearly doubled the value of the home. I wasn't going to sell, not right now. I had other plans. It had been months since I spoke to Jenny and I missed her something awful. I was still stung by her choosing the cheaters over me, but eventually my need to see her overwhelmed my pride. I called her cell phone one afternoon when I knew she'd be home. She couldn't contact me because my lawyer didn't give out my number. I was hoping she would still have the same number, and I was right. She probably had caller ID, and I knew my number wouldn't be recognized. I just hoped she would answer anyway. Hello? Hi, Jenny? It's me, your dad. Dad? Really? Yes, honey. I miss you so much. I'm so sorry I haven't seen you. I guess I was just too broken up about what happened. I'd love to see you again if you'll have me. I can't believe it. It's really you. Yes, Jenny. It's me, and I miss you like crazy. I miss you too. I thought you didn't want me anymore. That's not true. I know I was stupid for not seeing you. I was just too upset about the divorce. But I'm better now. I would like to have you over to my place if you're free. Maybe this weekend. Sure. I have to check with Mom. She's pretty mad at you right now. I know she is. I can't help that. But don't worry about her. I just want to see you and catch up. Maybe we can go to a concert or something. Anything you want. Okay. Let me call you back. Is this your number? Yes. You can call me anytime. It's so wonderful just hearing your voice. I love you, Jenny. I heard her utter a sob as she said, "Me too, Dad. I love you." She hung up, and I was on top of the world. An hour later, I got another call. "You a-hole," she said when I answered. "Nice to hear you too, Carol. You go months without any contact with your daughter." She snapped at me angrily. "The poor girl has just about stopped crying every night for you, and now her cowardly father decides to show up and break her heart again." "I won't break her heart, Carol. Not like you broke mine. But you're right. I want to see her. I need to see her." There was a long pause of silence. "Carol, are you still there?" "Yes. I want to see Jenny. How about this weekend? Is she free?" Another long pause. "Then, I guess so." "Great. What time can I pick her up?" "You're really a jerk, you know," Carol said. "I hope you're serious. Jenny needs you, Mark. You're not going to build up her hopes, get angry, and just disappear and break her heart again, are you?" "No way. I've learned my lesson. I miss her, and I need to have her in my life. I can pick her up anytime you say, Carol. Please don't make me beg." "All right. How about 6 o'clock on Friday? You're not going to disappoint her again, I hope." "No. 6 on Friday. I'll be there." "Thanks, Carol." "Okay, bye." "Goodbye." I spent the week getting the house ready. Jenny was astonished when I pulled up in a black limo to pick her up. We hugged for nearly 5 minutes. Carol was watching us from the doorway with tears in her eyes. I didn't see the a-hole, but I could tell that Carol was surprised to see the limo. After the driver opened the door and put Jenny's suitcase in the trunk, Carol came out and squeezed my arm. "You better not disappoint her, Mark. She's been looking forward to this all week long. If you upset her, I'll kill you." I wanted to say that she already did when she left me, but I didn't. "Don't worry, Carol," I told her softly. "Now that everything between us is sorted out, I just want to help Jenny any way I can." She gave me a long, hard look and then walked back to her tiny apartment. Jenny was squealing with excitement as we drove away. We had a wonderful weekend. Jenny was flabbergasted to find that her old residence, where she and Carol lived with Jim, was now my house. I took her to a very upscale restaurant and let her order anything she wanted. On Saturday, we went to some boys' band concert. I never heard of them, but some woman from work told me about them, and I got tickets. Jenny was thrilled. She also loved the hot tub in the back deck. It made me think about getting a swimming pool installed. I had a catered barbecue party with a few friends of mine from work. They had kids around Jenny's age, and they all got along great. I spent a pretty penny on this weekend, but it was well worth it. By the time I took her home, my daughter was chattering away about the weekend, even making plans for the next time she came over. The weekend was a rousing success. I haven't been so happy since before my divorce. Monday evening, I got another call from Carol. "You bought Jim's house?" She cried with obvious distress. "You know, he took a big cut in the value of that house. He never wanted to sell, and he's really upset to find out it was you that undercut his price like that. So he thinks I cheated him?" I replied, accentuating the word cheated. Carol didn't miss the insinuation. "So, payback's a witch, right?" She said bitterly, before I could. "He wasn't forced to sell," I told her. "I heard it was a distress sale, so in a way I did him a favor buying it." "You're one cold-hearted creep, Mark. I never thought you were like that." "I didn't used to be," I replied. "I used to be a nice average guy, pretty trusting and naive. See what that got me? Then a couple of sleazy cheaters did me wrong and really opened my eyes. Thanks for that." After a long pause, she hung up. The next couple months, Jenny spent almost every weekend with me, and I couldn't have been happier. The house that I bought from Jim was now mine, and with her around, it really began to feel like a home. It was much larger and more luxurious than the one we had before. Unlike our old house, even though I knew what went on here, this one didn't have any bad memories for me. I just forgot about who owned it before and enjoyed the amenities. Of course, Jenny loved it. She said she kept telling her mom how much fun she had with me. Jim was spending the weekends in jail, but all week he had to listen to my daughter gushing about how I now lived in his house and how fixed up it was now. Carol could see that Jim hated hearing that and had to tell her not to talk about it anymore because it upset him so much. Tough shit. It was a couple months later when I picked Jenny up. Jim was in jail, leaving Carol by herself. Last week, Jenny asked if her mother could join us sometime, and I agreed it would be nice. When I pulled up and she ran down the stairs of her apartment, I took her bag and told Jenny to go invite her mom to have dinner with us. She was elated and ran back inside to get her. A few minutes later, Carol appeared at the doorway with a scowl. She sent Jenny to the limo to pack her suitcase and approached me on the stairway. She eyed me warily and asked, "What kind of shit are you trying to pull, Mark?" "There's no agenda, Carol." I told her honestly. "Jenny asked about having you with us sometime. I thought it might be nice. Despite all the bad history between us, I know you're a good mother. You may not believe this, but I miss you." Carol flinched. My remark startled her, and she turned away for a moment. "I know you're with Jim now. I get it. But time marches on, Carol. We used to get along as a family, and Jenny, I would like to have you with us. If you're just going to be here alone all weekend, why not spend it with me and your daughter? I won't bite, I promise." She tried to hold back a smile at my remark, but wasn't entirely successful. "I don't think Jim would appreciate me going with you." "You're not going with me," I reminded her. "We'll have Jenny to chaperone, so there will be no funny business with her watching. Just a nice family meal and some pleasant conversation. No pressure, Carol, but I think you'll enjoy it." She gave me a hard stare before exhaling hard. "Oh, all right. I guess it won't hurt to just have a meal. Give me a minute." The evening turned out wonderful. I have to admit, despite her betrayal, I still love Carol. I just can't turn it off like a switch, probably never will. She was a lousy, deceitful wife, and I knew there's no going back. At the same time, I was a crummy father after abandoning my daughter for so long. I admit I still think fondly of her sometimes. Unfortunately, I can never trust her as a wife. But that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy her company that night. I could tell the past few months have been hard on her. She has gained weight. Her expression was rather harsh, and the fine wrinkles around her eyes and mouth seemed to have deepened a bit. But in my eyes, she was still beautiful. The most excited was Jenny, who babbled on and on about how nicely the house was fixed up. As I got dinner ready, she took her mother around the backyard and showed her all the upgrades: the refinished deck, the hot tub, the gazebo, the flower gardens. She even told her about my plans to install a swimming pool. Then she took Carol on a tour around the house. I wasn't there to witness the two of them, but when Carol returned to the kitchen, she was misty-eyed and there were tears in her eyes. Maybe she was missing what she used to have before I began ruining her boyfriend's career. "You've really done a lot with this house," Carol said over dinner. "How can you afford all this on an accountant's salary? I don't have anyone to spend my money on." When a sympathetic look appeared on her face, I added quickly, "And I made some investments that turned out well for me. I'm glad you approve. I was hoping you'd like the decor. I wanted it to feel like a home." I looked over at our daughter, who was gobbling down a piece of prime rib. "Now it does." After dinner, we had apple pie and ice cream with our coffee. Then I took them out on the deck and put on a cheesy fireworks demonstration with some inexpensive fireworks I picked up. It wasn't that great, but Jenny squealed with enthusiasm as they shot up, exploded, and burst into a dazzling display colors. For a few precious moments, it was almost like we were a family again. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. I invited Carol to spend the night with us. I let her know that she would have her own room, and there was nothing romantic in my offer. She politely declined, so I got her a cab and sent her home. Work kept me extremely busy for the rest of the month. I was still making money on my investments, but I kept working to keep my mind from wandering about my lack of a love life. I could have paid for escorts to get off, but truthfully, I really didn't want meaningless sex without romance. I wanted a solid relationship with my daughter, and if I could get along with Carol, so much the better. It was Jenny's call one weeknight that shocked me. "Dad," she cried, sniffling. "Jenny? What's the matter?" "It's Mom. She's crying. She's in the bedroom and won't let me in." "What happened?" "They had an argument. I think she found out Jim's cheating on her. She's a mess, Dad. Can you come over?" So my prediction came true. The sleazy scum sucker's true colors finally came out. "Where is he right now?" "They had a big argument in the bedroom," Jenny said, her voice cracking. I was so scared. Mom was screaming at him. There was lots of banging. Afterward, he came out and slammed the door hard. He was cursing as he left the house. I think he drove away. "I'm so scared, Dad." "Just stay there, Jenny. I'll be right over." I called the police and reported a possible domestic abuse. They met me at Carol's apartment, and we knocked on the door. My ex-wife answered after a long time, looking terrible. Ginny ran out and into my arms. I hugged her tight as she sobbed into my chest. "Thank you for coming, Dad." She gushed. "I'm so scared." Carol went to the kitchen and sat down as the police officer questioned her. I looked for any signs of abuse. She didn't admit to any, and I didn't see any visible bruises. But that didn't mean he didn't hurt her. I asked the officer if I could have a word with her, alone, and he agreed. "Carol," I said softly, "are you in any danger? Would you like to come over to my house for a while, just until things cool off?" "Oh, Mark, I don't know what to say." She blubbered. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You can sleep in the extra bedroom. Ginny will be there too. We can take care of you there. I care about you, Carol, and Ginny loves you. I don't want to leave you here with him. You and I had issues, but just forget about that. I want you to be safe. Please come with us. Ginny and I are begging you." "Okay." She whispered so softly I could barely hear her. "Thank you, Carol," I said with feeling. "Don't worry about anything. Let's get some things packed for you. If you forget something, we can buy it." She sobbed a little, then whispered, "Thank you, Mark." The police had to write up a report. But since Carol said there was no abuse, Jim didn't have to come in for questioning. Lucky for him, there wasn't. He's still on probation for the assault on me and would have been back in jail again. Over the next few weeks, Carol basically moved back in with me. She was crushed by her boyfriend's treachery and broke off her relationship with him. We talked about it one time. She said he was banging the receptionist at the car repair shop where he worked. It sounded so typical of that a-hole. He never could keep his lust in his pants. Over the next few weeks, I did everything I could to provide a safe, loving environment for Ginny, for Carol too. I know she appreciated it, and Ginny couldn't have been happier. She loved having both parents home every night. Her attitude became better, her performance at school improved, and her social life did too, as boys began showing up around the house a few times. We ate dinner together and went to movies sometimes. I loved it when Carol would cook for us. Having a delicious dinner waiting for me was great. It made me leave work on time whenever I could. There wasn't any physical contact between Carol and I. She was still distressed about her situation, and knew how I felt when she let me down. From the start, I made it clear that we were just friends, but I wanted her safe. And having her there with Ginny, and I made it seem like a real home now. I found her a job with a client of mine. Later, we found her an apartment nearby. Most of the money she got from our divorce was spent on bills and Jim's legal expenses. She did have some furniture that she got out of Jim's apartment, but it wasn't enough. I gave her a coffee maker for a housewarming present. Ginny was sad she was leaving, and Carol said she'd miss us a lot, but it was time for her to be on her own. Living with me would only stir up unpleasant memories for both of us. She needed to start fresh. She soon started dating. The guy she's dating seemed pretty cool. Ginny said he spoke nice to her, and she liked him. I guess that's as good a reference as I could hope for. As Carol pulled away from me, Ginny and I grew closer. I think I depend on her as much as she does on me. I watched her grow from a little girl to a sweet adolescent into an intelligent, responsible young lady. She's taking advanced courses at school because we're starting the process to find a college for her. Her grades are doing well, and there are a number of universities interested in her. She's a wonderful daughter. I couldn't ask for better, and I'm incredibly proud of her. My love life isn't very robust, but there are some women that have expressed interest in an aging old accountant. I have them over sometimes so Ginny can give me her appraisal. So far, none have turned into a solid romance, but I'm still hoping there's someone for me out there. Only time will tell. In the meantime, I'm busy and successful in my work, and I'm enjoying raising Ginny for the short time we have before she leaves for school. I have to say things turned out better than I thought they would a few years ago. Divorce sucks, but life goes on. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.